So in today's class we will discuss about virus, worms and malware. So first we will study about the virus, then we will study about the worm. What is the difference between the virus and the worms? So the virus is nothing but it requires some host program or some host operating system or any kind of host software to affect other files, whereas worms are nothing but it is basically it will replicate itself. It doesn't require any host program to get affected to affect other cells other programs or files. When a virus affected program is run, the virus code is executed first. One of the first tasks of virus code is to seek other programs not yet affected and then pass on the infection to one or more of them. A malicious virus may then perform actions such as deleting certain files. So this is nothing but the action of the one of the actions which a virus performs. It can delete or it can also print some messages, okay, which is unnecessary. So for example, hello world, it can print everywhere hello world in that way. So execution of virus code is usually followed by the execution of the host's original program. So first the virus is affected, virus is executed, then the host program is executed. All the virus code need not be located at the start of the infected file. In some cases, virus code is both prepended and appended to the host file. So it can be attached to the beginning or end of the host file. Virus code could be split into several segments and interspersed throughout the infected file using jump statement and the end of each virus segment. So they are also telling that you can split it into several segments and you can spread it everywhere. I mean in each and every part of the file. In most of these cases, the size of the infected program is larger than the original host program. This helps antivirus software to detect infected code. So students, yes, so what they are telling here, so always the size of the infected program is larger than the original file. So obviously this is the reason how antivirus software detects the virus easily. So what does virus do in counter to evade detection? Evading detection means to make it unrecognizable to the anti-software softwares. Some viruses modify the file service interrupt handler that returns attributes of the files. So by doing so, the service handler may be programmed to return the uninfected length of the file. So students, it will basically modify the file service interrupt handler, because of which it will be returning only the uninfected length. It will not return the entire length of the file. So this is one of the ways in which the virus program will evade its detection from the antivirus software, because antivirus software will detect through the size. Basically it will come to know the size. If the size is more, means then it will recognize it as an infected program. So this is one of the counter effect thing what virus does. That is one of the ways of evading detection from the antivirus software. Another thing is nothing but basically it uses the compression. Okay, so it will basically compress the file. When it compresses the file, obviously the file size will be reduced. Okay, so that this is one more way how it evades. So to infect another file, the virus first compresses that file and then prepends the virus code to the compressed file. The infected file must be uncompressed just prior to execution. One of the characteristic features of many viruses is the set of system calls they make. System calls are used by application programs to request services of the operating system. They are made to read or write files, spawn new processes. Spawn new processes means to start new processes so that a new process will be born. Establish TCP connections, etc. Some viruses make calls to copy their own code to other files, create or modify entries in the Windows registry, or search for email. So you can see students, there are lot of activities which a virus will do, and it will basically destroy the different kinds of files. For example, here it will simply increase the process time, or it will give more work to the processor by simply in increasing the number of processes. Here it will establish the new TCP connections. It will increase the connections which are unnecessary. Okay, some viruses make the copy of its own codes to other files, which is once again unnecessary. Some will create or modify the entries in the registry, or search for an email. So there are a lot of things which a virus will do to affect. So this is the things about the virus. Now let us understand about the worm, characteristics of worm. So the above points were the characteristics of an virus, so which told us the how the virus behaves and how it spreads to other program, or how it evades from the antivirus program, all these things, and what harms, to what extent it can cause to the other files. So all these things we have understood here in the virus characteristics. Next, let us go to the worm characteristics. So basically worms are most commonly classified based on their vector of propagation. The main categories include internet scanning worms, email worms, P2P, that is peer-to-peer worms, web worms, and mobile worms. So in this video we will study about some of these characteristics. So before that we will understand about the features of the worms. So the main features of the worms are enhanced targeting, enhanced speed, enhanced capabilities, enhanced destructive power. So enhanced targeting. So the most important attribute of a worm is that it spreads its infection to other computers. Many target selection strategies have been proposed and implemented. Worms that spread through email. So for spreading into the another computer, so it will use these strategies. Worms, it will take the help of an email program to attach to different programs. One more is the mobile worm. So it basically obtains the phone numbers of the victims from the phone book in the cell phone hosting the worm. Hosting the worm means the cell phone which is having the worm. It will collect the phone numbers. So this is the work of the mobile worm. Then using those phone numbers it will get affected to the respective numbers. Next one is some web worms. So these web worms use search engines to harvest URLs of potentially vulnerable targets. So URL is a target. Using this it will affect various sites. Next is internet scanning worms. So this on the other hand scans the IP address space for vulnerable machines. So out of all these things, the most straightforward approach is random scanning. So this random scanning is nothing but it chooses IP address at randomly. So this was basically adopted by Code-Red version 1. So Code-Red version is a worm. Even Code-Red version 2 it's also a worm. So over 80% of the crime it attempted to connect to victims with whom it shared the network address. This strategy is more successful since hosts in the same network are likely to be closer and be running the same software. Worms like Nimda. So Nimda, which was invented in September 2001, it spread aggressively. So how did it spread? So it propagated through HTTP and email. So email was the medium for it to propagate. So enhanced targeting through all these four ways, student, and getting affected. Enhanced speed. So here they explain us how the worm basically affects the host with good speed, or how does it spread at a large rate to different files. So to enhance the infection rate, some worms are designed to spawn multiple threads. Yes, once again, spawning multiple threads means creating various threads. So So each thread is responsible for setting up connections to a different subset of hosts, thus increasing the rate at which infection is spread. So you can see this is one of the ways in which the worm spreads, by creating various threads and sending those connections basically to various hosts. Some worms reduce infection latency by targeting a buffer overflow vulnerability on an application that employs UDP rather than TCP. So infection latency is nothing but the basically it is the rate at which the infection is spread, latency. Okay, so how much it can withstand. So see, reducing the infection latency means basically infection latency means how much the computer can avoid itself from getting infected. So this worm, by using UDP connection as a medium, it will reduce the infection latency, so that by reducing the infection latency, the computer basically gets affected very fast. So this is one more way. It doesn't use TCP because TCP involves three-way handshake, so it takes lot of time. So the virus will not make TCP as a medium to increase its speed, whereas it uses UDP. So a steep increase in the number of infected machines at the very outset of a worm epidemic has a multiplicative effect on spreading rate. For this purpose, the attacker could create one or more hit lists carrying addresses of several thousand vulnerable machines. The first worms to let loose could carry one such list. As a worm infects each new machine, it splits its list between itself and the machine it has just infected. So we can see, students, in this by the various ways these lines say that how the worm increases the speed or to get the files infected. So given that most of the machines on the hit lists are vulnerable, the worm spreads rapidly during the initial stage of the epidemic. Thereafter, the infected machines could spread the infection using random scanning or some other spreading method. So here we can understand this random scanning is one of the ways of spreading the worms in a faster manner. So most of the worms has used this method. Next one is enhanced capabilities. Most worms and viruses have unique and distinct signature. So it's a pattern of bits, usually assembly level language code. Okay, assembly language code. So most of the virus or worm code basically will be written in the assembly level language. Worm and virus signatures are the key to detecting them. However, their sophisticated code obfuscation techniques to evade detection. So students, what they are telling here is nothing but the worm and virus signature will help us to detect them because it will have a distinct pattern of bits, but still there are some very much sophisticated, means hi-fi code evading techniques, so that virus virus or worm will not be detected. One such technique is the use of encryption. So they will use the encryption for disguising worm code. So students, to make the worm code not detectable or undetectable, it uses the encryption process. Different instances of the worm may use different keys for encryption. Thus they might fall to match any existing worm signature. Such worms are said to be polymorphic. A polymorphic worm would have to be decrypted before being executed. This suggests that a decryptor routine in the clear would have to be a part of the worm code. So one more thing we have to understand here is nothing but there will be a decryptor routine in the worm. Decryptors themselves may be very simple, involving XOR operation or trivial shift based in substitutions. So these operations will be there in the decryptor routine, that is XOR operations or trivial shift based substitutions. However, detecting a worm on the assumption that the decryptor routine is invariant would not always succeed. So this 19-point figure, whichever we can see, okay, this is the code. So this is the normal code and this is the code which is having the worm, and we can see in between here, between the second code we can see the additional lines. So this is the how the worm code has infused into the correct code. That is version 2 is affected by a worm, whereas version 1 is not affected by a worm. Enhanced destructive power. So it is estimated that worms such as Code Red and Nimda causes billions of dollars in damage. So students, this Code Red and Nimda, basically they were the worms which has attacked most of the files in the past, and it has caused various huge damage in dollars. So analysts estimate costs based on lost productivity, cleanup costs, system downtime, which affects business and revenue. So it affected these parameters. The worm affected these parameters. Productivity was reduced. Cleanup cost is nothing but whenever the worm code gets infused into the correct code, what happens is that the worm code will have unnecessary worm. First of all, it will have the worm code which itself is an unnecessary. Other than it will also have other unnecessary code which is created by the worm for its use. So all these code had to be removed. So it is also increased the cleanup costs. Even the system downtime. So system downtime, basically whenever all these works were done, basically the system was kept not running. So by doing all these things, it affected the business and the revenues to a lot. Fast spreading worms also cause severe network congestion problems, disrupting normal internet traffic and contributing to system DOS time. Nevertheless, most worms thus far have been relatively benign. Some worms contributed ATTA packets to a DDoS attack or caused website defacement. The Witty worm is one of the Witty worm, which appeared in March 2004, however, was qualitatively different. It was the first worm to carry a destructive payload, deleted a random selection of victims' hard disk, leading to a system crash. This Witty worm, basically, it had a destructive payload. Destructive payload means it has some of the code which was created to destroy the victim's disk, which also led to a system crash. So these four things were the main features of the worm. Enhanced targeting, which told us how do they spread. Enhanced speed, how do they spread, with what speed it spread. Enhanced and what methods it will use to spread. So that we studied here. Enhanced capabilities, its capabilities to destruct the machine, and another one is enhanced destructive power. So where and on what and all area it basically affected. Now let us study about the internet scanning worms. So what are these internet scanning worms? One characteristics of internet scanning worms is that they are self-activated. That is, the ability to spread without human intervention distinguishes them from most type of email, P2P and web worms. This category of worms is called because they scan the internet looking for vulnerable machines. The vulnerability could be a buffer overflow problem. So buffer overflow problem is nothing but you are adding an additional code to a buffer so that it cannot hold that code anymore due to less space in the buffer. So that is a buffer overflow problem. So vulnerability could be a buffer overflow problem in a commonly used service provided by a particular version of OS. The worm communicates with and delivers its malicious payload to the victim using TCP or UDP. UDP were used in most of the cases. Once installed on a victim, it could erase local files, steal secrets, and deface web pages. So all these things basically were the effect of the worms on a victim. So throughout this chapter we were studying code red. So here this is let us study the case study of the code red and will understand better about the code red. Okay, what code red did and how it affected the system. One of the so it all started on June 18, 2001 when a buffer overflow vulnerability was discovered in the Microsoft IIS web server. A patch for this vulnerability was developed a few days later. It is estimated that there were several million IIS servers in active deployment. Even assuming that a large percentage of these were patched, they still left plenty of room for the spread of worms, which was unleashed on July 12, 2001. Worm itself was carried in HTTP request messages targeted at IIS servers. So they were targeting the IIS servers which were in millions basically in use those days. Active deployment means they were in use. First version of the worm were used a random number generator to generate new address. So this tells how it used to affect the machines. This part of the code line. The first version of the worm used a random number generator to generate new addresses to addresses of machine to infect. So it was using a random number generator. It was affecting the new machines. So the same seed was used for the random number generator in every instance of a worm. So this resulted in same machines being infected over and again. So the same seed was used. So this was one of the shortcomings of the worm, which was affected only few machines. Few machines means basically the machines, same machines. So on July 19, 2001, a variant of Code Red 1 was launched, wherein a random seed was generated in a worm. So once again they used different seeds in that variant of the Code Red 1. So this worm basically started affecting different computers because different seed was there. Code Red 2 was installed a backdoor providing an attacker remote administrator level access to the victim. Slammer. So this is one more worm. So SQL Slammer was launched on 25 January 2003. So this was targeting the database and targeted a buffer overflow vulnerability on the Microsoft SQL Server 2000. The worm sent packets on UDP port 1434, the database software's resolution service. It used simple random scanning to spread. Slammer's payload was a mere 384 bytes in length. So this was the size. So far smaller than the 4 KB payload of Code Red. So Slammer was a small worm. This was taking around 4 KB space and it was just taking 384 bytes. And UDP was used as a connection. Okay. So why UDP were used? Because connecting to UDP was far more easier because of non-existence of handshaking properties. Thank you, students. So we'll understand about the worm propagation models in the next video.